Welcome to Thursday, the second day of November 2023. Your Day Weather Podcast being brought to you today by Cowboy State Daily, Wyoming's only daily newspaper. Check them out at cowboystatedaily.com and don't forget to subscribe to their daily digital email newsletter. It's all about the Pacific. The Pacific dominating not only the air we'll be breathing, but also the precipitation chances that will be coming and going for parts of the western United States. It all depends on where you are, of course, but the Pacific is going to dominate, and we're watching it really closely here over the next couple of weeks because it's giving us some signals that other changes are coming long term. We'll talk about that here at the end of the podcast. So westerly flow coming from the Pacific is going to bring mild air across the western and central United States, reversing the cold trend that we had move in about a week ago. This is going to drive strong jet stream winds into the Pacific Northwest. So there will be some needed rain, quite a bit of it, in Washington, Oregon, Northern California, Idaho, and then some snows across parts of the far northern Rockies. The central and southern Rockies are just going to basically get windy areas along and east of the Divide. Windy today, especially along I-80 and I-25 in Wyoming. Pretty strong and gusty winds in those areas today. Be prepared for that, but they're going to be Chinook winds, so temperatures with them will be mild. Now, there's a system that's going to get further east and south towards the middle of next week. It doesn't look like it's going to be what I'd call a big storm, but it may bring some impacts around Wednesday of next week, and it will bring those impacts a little bit further south and a little bit more on the eastern side of the divide. The satellite image this morning showing a lot going on. We titled The Pacific as the title of the podcast today. And, this is why. There's just a lot going on. We got a deep low here just off the south end of the far western areas of the Aleutians. We've got this pipeline of moisture coming right into Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia in an area of low pressure here. And there's just a lot of cold, unstable air that is right now coming into Alaska, the Aleutians, and making that low pressure form there. In turn, a large area of broad high pressure is forming right here. So you're just not going to have much weather under this dome of high pressure, but where this pipeline of moisture and these strong jet stream winds is just directing everything into that area right there. So that's why it's going to be so wet. So here we are with the 500 millibar chart this morning, the current low going into areas north of Vancouver, then that big low we just showed you on the satellite imagery, and then strong jet stream winds feeding that moisture in. The contrast in air pressure between that big high and that big low wanting to form those strong jet stream winds. So this is today and this is by Sunday. It's essentially the same pattern. We just are feeding those strong jet stream winds and moisture into the Pacific Northwest and across the northern Rockies. And along this jet stream flow, because the main jet stream is going to be up here like this, you have these little lows, these little ripples that just come off the water and come on through and move very quickly across the northern tier of the country. So that's where the action is. Along and south of the jet stream axis, you're going to have windy periods. And that'll be the case here through likely Sunday. And here are those strong jet stream winds. This is at about 30,000 feet. Now this is by Sunday, but through the course of the next several days, that jet stream wind is just parked there. But you see it's getting pushed out further all the way into the upper Midwest. So this is very impressive. And when you see jet stream energy like that, it's going to bring weather. And this area of strong jet stream winds gets pushed further inland by Tuesday night and Wednesday of next week. Between now and Sunday, so this is the precipitation forecast through late Sunday, beginning today. So you can see all the moisture here. Then it gets out and spreads out a little bit further to the east. Look at the Yellowstone Plateau, western areas of Wyoming, Bighorns, southern mountains of Montana, western Montana, the panhandle of Idaho, eastern areas of Oregon and Washington picking up some needed precipitation. But once you get south of that line, you got nothing down there. So wet and colder up north, windy and warmer down south. Focusing in on Wyoming and the region a little bit better, this is the same graphic through Sunday, just focused in a little bit. So you can see Yellowstone, the northern and western Wyoming mountains are going to see some good snows out of this. Snow levels are going to be fairly high, but places like Jackson, Yellowstone Park, the upper Green River Basin, you've got some weather coming on in. Now, as we mentioned, snow levels are going to be fairly high because of the milder Pacific air and really no Canadian influence. But there will be snow falling in those areas there. And zooming in closer through Sunday, do expect some high elevation snows in those areas. By Wednesday of next week, this is the area that is a little larger. Again, it's not going to be a big storm, but this is part of those strong jet stream winds coming into the Rockies. Notice it just reloads up here. Another big low forms in Alaska and near the Aleutians. So basically, it just recharges up there. And that's why there's going to be more weather down the road here in a bit. So towards the middle of next week, we'll see a cooling trend, and we're going to see precipitation get further south and east. So this is for the period of next Monday through next Friday. So this is for a different set of time based on what I showed you earlier. So more precipitation for the Pacific Northwest across the northern plains and Rockies. But look at the mountains of Colorado here. That trough coming on in will probably be a good snow producer in the Colorado high country and the mountains of Wyoming, northern Utah again. But again, the areas south are still going to be generally dry in this pattern. And there's the snowfall potential for next week. So basically, this is next week's snowfall potential getting further south and still feeding those Pacific Northwest and northern areas. Now, further out, as we get beyond the weekend or around the weekend of the 11th and 12th, the weekend after this one, and shortly thereafter, it's all about the Pacific. There's another deep cold low here that will spin off a trough right here, either late next weekend or the days following it. And what we are expecting is potentially this area of low pressure and colder weather to make more of a move into the U.S. We're talking about something that's more than a week away. We're talking about something that's 10 to 12 days out. But I do see that pattern potentially becoming a colder, wetter one for the western United States. And we see that when we look at the East Pacific Oscillation. Now, what we're looking at is actually a whole month down here on the time scale. So this actually is going all the way into the middle of December. Right now, we just got out of a negative phase of the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, which was partly responsible for the Arctic outbreak that we had last week. And now we're trending towards a positive phase. But look what happens when we go further out into the second half of November. We go into a strong negative phase right around the 13th, 12th, 13th, all the way up into the first week of December right here. So if we continue to see this trend, basically the middle of November into early December could be a cold, stormy, wet period. Maybe, possibly. It's just something in the long-term tool bag that we have to kind of stick our neck out a little bit and see what the long-range trends will be. So we're going to watch that second half of November into early December as possibly bringing, well, more in the way of a winter weather pattern to the western U.S. Something to keep an eye on. Have yourself a good Thursday. See you tomorrow.